attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are logging in from. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Making the Grade with Growth Mindsets, how the science of positive psychology can help you succeed in law school and beyond. My name is Catherine Bender, and I am the Programming Director for the Dave Nee Foundation. And I just want to thank the ABA Law Student Division, and in particular, our fearless leader in technology, Adam, who is making sure that nothing goes wrong during this presentation today. And I also want to thank our speakers, and I'll say more about them in just a minute. I just want to provide a little bit of background for those of you who might not be familiar with the Dave Nee Foundation. Our nonprofit organization began out of a tragedy when Dave Nee, who was a very successful undergraduate student at Princeton for undergrad, and then Fordham Law School. Dave graduated in 2005 from law school. He was very successful academically. He was really involved with moot court, and everybody really loved Dave. And it was while he was studying for the bar after finishing law school that Dave died by suicide. And Dave's friends and family wanted to do something to understand more about Dave's death and to honor his life, and also raise awareness about mental health issues. And so our program on Common Counsel, we travel to law schools and law firms to raise awareness about depression and suicide prevention, and we're really care for the overall wellness of law students. March 28th was ABA Law Student Mental Health Awareness Day, and we see this webinar as just an extension of how the Dave Nee Foundation and the ABA Law Student Division really cares about your health and wellness. One thing that I've learned from traveling to the law schools is that law students often feel that they're not good enough, that regardless of the ranking of the school they're in or the grades that they have, that they're constantly getting messages that they're not good enough. And so we wanted to offer students a different way of thinking and about resiliency. And so with much more knowledge on this topic than me, I'm going to pass it over to our speakers, who I'm very grateful for. And Brafford was an intern with us a couple of years ago, but she and Martha will tell you their backgrounds, which will share with you. You'll easily understand that they are uniquely qualified to offer this webinar to you tonight. So thank you so much, Anne and Martha.
All right, thanks so much, Kate. So just a little bit about myself and Martha before we get started. I am Anne Brafford. I practiced law for about 18 years. I was a partner at Morgan Lewis, one of the biggest firms in the country. And while I was still practicing law, I earned a Master's of Applied Positive Psychology, really for the purpose of trying to help law firms figure out not only how to be financially successful, they're very good at that, but also how to focus better on developing people and make great places to work. And while I was getting my master's degree, I decided that I was so interested in this new mission that I resigned from the practice of law and am now a PhD student in positive organizational psychology. And my entire focus is lawyers and law firms, and really trying to help the legal practice, the legal profession, live up to its best self, and really have lawyers feel like they have a great, fulfilling career, because it is a really great job. And Martha, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Anne. Hi, everybody. My name is Martha Knudsen, and similar to Anne, I've been an attorney for almost 17 years now. I was a litigator in private practice for about 10 years and a law firm partner. After that, and until just about a month ago, I worked as the general counsel for a top 10 real estate management company. Like Anne, I also have a master's in applied positive psychology, and I am currently working as an assistant instructor in that same program at the University of Pennsylvania. I left the practice of law recently because I really want to work with attorneys and legal organizations and law students, because I believe it is such an important profession, and all too often, because of the stress and all the things that lawyers have to deal with, it becomes can become very difficult for attorneys to remain happy and have a great life while they can also have a great career. So I'd like to see some changes there. So that is me, and thank you for being here tonight. This is our agenda for today. To take a look at what we're going to discuss, just basically our law school grades impacting my well-being. What is a growth mindset and how can it help me? And how can I start now on the path of achieving long-term happiness in the field of law? So why are we really here? Law school is filled with pressure and uncertainty, especially at this time of the year when you're heading into finals and so much of your life can seem to hang on exams and grades. So we want to get you thinking about the beliefs that you might have about grades, how these beliefs might impact your feelings about yourself, and how strong beliefs may even influence your abilities, your mental toughness, and your resilience when facing the pressures of law school and ultimately the practice. All right, so I would love it if you would just take a minute, please, and think back to the end of last semester. Finals are over, and you're waiting to get your grades. Then the day comes. Your grades come out, they're in front of you, and you open them up to see your results. How did you feel when you saw them? So if you could write in the comment box just something about how you felt.
This is my little baby niece, Ivy, that is illustrating for you how you might have felt. Either very happy or not so happy.
All right, Kate, can you let us know some of the comments?
Yes, but for some reason I'm not seeing them.
All right. Well, some of the things that I have seen people say and comments that they've made about grades would be, I got my grades back and I've always been at the top of the class and I was at the bottom. I felt like I was stupid, or I felt like I couldn't learn, or maybe I felt like I was awesome. I got the best grades in the class and I must be super smart and really good at this. Sometimes people might say, I got those grades back and it didn't matter how much I studied. I'm never going to do well. So there's a lot of different reactions that you can have. And what are some of the reactions that you've heard to this question?
Really similar, and people are all over the map. Like even when people do well, then there's the fear of, can you continue to do well? And for those who don't start off really, hitting the ground running, which can happen, they're worried that they're not going to do well during the rest of the years of law school, and then they're not going to get a job, and then they're not going to have a good life, and there can really be this cascading effect on your self-confidence just because one test didn't go as well as you had hoped.
So consider this. Was it, when you think about your grades and how you felt, was it what you felt or was it what you thought? Was it the grades that caused you to feel that way, or maybe was it what you thought about the grades and what you believed that they meant that caused your emotional response? So looking at your grades is just reading marks on a paper or on a screen, right? It isn't really the marks that are causing you to feel a certain way. It's the thoughts that you have about those marks and what they might mean that lead to your reaction. Feelings are not facts. And remember, don't believe everything that you think. So if law school is similar to when I was a student, and I'm guessing that you think about grades a lot. You probably talk about them all the time with other students as well, right? like who got what grade, who's where, at what rank in the class, who got the high in Professor so-and-so's class, who got the low, what the grades you received in a class might mean. I remember talking a lot about how our grades would impact us now, at the time in law school, and in the future. Some of the things that we would talk about was, oh, if I'm not in the top 10%, I'm never going to get interviews for the paying jobs, and I'm never going to get a clerkship, which means I'm never going to get a job, which means I'm never going to pay off my loans, and I'm going to be a failure. There are a lot of things that, like that we discussed. I would love it if you would type in some of the messages that you give or receive about grades with your classmates. All right, well, there is a reality check ahead here. How important is a happy and satisfying life to you in terms of your life goals? On some level, when you decided to go into the legal field and you entered law school, did you do it because you thought it would improve your life or bring you fulfillment in some way? Even if you didn't think it through in that much detail, you certainly didn't decide to go to law school because you wanted your life to suck, right? Like you didn't go because you wanted to be disappointed or miserable. So you get to law school, and grades suddenly seem to become king and equate to thoughts of the future and jobs. But what's really interesting about this is that in a study of 6,200 lawyers, the researchers looked at the factors most associated with success in the legal field: high income, partner-track jobs and prestigious law firms, stuff like that. And they found that these factors had almost zero correlation with happiness and well-being. So where's the disconnect then? There's something about when we start law school, we start translating our performance to our self-worth, thinking that grades equal self-worth, or that certain jobs equal self-worth. I mean, that's even if you didn't go to law school to get one of those jobs, right? So instead, our focus really should be more on our effort and on valuing learning as a goal. So that brings us to the main topic for today, growth mindsets. So before defining what a growth mindset is and identifying steps to develop it, let's first talk about why it could matter to your law school career. So we'll look at the evidence. What's the evidence that cultivating a growth mindset might help us? As lawyers and aspiring lawyers, like, evidence is pretty important to us. We want to know what it is. Teaching students to have a growth mindset raises their grades and achievement test scores significantly. So in this study here, students with a growth mindset had an upward trajectory in grades, while those who viewed their intelligence as a fixed quality, like a trait like you have blue eyes or brown eyes, they did not. And this was true even though these students all had equal levels of prior achievement. It was the students who believed that their intelligence was malleable. They did better than did equally able students who viewed their intelligence as an unchangeable fixed entity. And this was true for our students of all levels of ability. Many studies also show that a growth mindset is especially important for students who are laboring under negative stereotypes about their abilities, such as Black or Latino students or females in math or science. For example, in one study, Black college students performed worse than white students on standardized tests when their race was emphasized. However, when race wasn't emphasized, the Black students performed the same or better than white students. The results showed that the performance was impacted just by thinking of the negative stereotype. Another study predicted students' failure to recover from an initial poor grade if they had a fixed mindset, whereas they predicted successful recovery if the students had a growth mindset. So think back, and you may be 1Ls on the phone, you maybe are past that wonderful year, but think back to your 1L year and your first semester grades. What this research suggests is that, let's say you get a poor grade in first semester torts. So if you believe that this grade means that you were not smart and you're not good at law school, it would make it much more likely that you would repeat the same poor grade the second semester. In contrast, if you got a poor grade first semester and you believe that, hey, this was my first law school test ever, man, I'm learning, I'm going to improve, I just need a new strategy, that means you are much more likely to get a better grade the next time. So there was another study.
Just for pause for a second there, Mark. Isn't that crazy? We've seen the mindset research for so long that I think that we forget how even we felt when we saw it. It's hard to believe that really your confidence level affects your ability level. And we have everything we're talking about today is based on the background that we have developed based on research. So it isn't just our opinion. Just think positive. This really is. We have over 300 studies that are in this domain showing that your mindset really does affect your ability. That when your confidence declines, it has this whole cascading effect on your cognitive abilities that can affect your outcomes, which is just nuts. So I just wanted to take a moment there, Martha, and said, this is crazy. Look at the evidence we're talking about. This can really make a difference.
No, absolutely. I think that I think it's something that I wish that I would have realized when I was in law school for sure. There's another really interesting study that I think has a lot of things for law students to think about. It's looking at the Pygmalion effect in students. So at the beginning of this one school year, researchers came in and gave IQ tests to students. Then the researchers pulled the teachers aside and said, hey, these certain students in your class, like Susie and Billy, are academic superstars. These two have incredible potential for growth. Then they told the teachers, listen, don't tell anybody this. Do not treat those students any differently than normal or any differently than anybody else. So they monitored the teacher, they monitored the class the whole year, and at the end of the year, the students were given the IQ test again. Now those students who were identified, Billy and Susie, or whoever I call them, those two students that the researchers told the teachers about as being academic superstars, they posted off the charts IQ scores. But you know what? The researchers had actually lied to the teachers, and these same students had completely average IQ test scores at the beginning of the year. Although these teachers had said nothing directly to these kids and had spent equal amounts of time with everyone, two crucial things had happened. The belief that the teachers had in the students' potential had been unwittingly and non-verbally communicated. And more importantly, these non-verbal messages were then taken in by the students and transformed into reality. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what does this tell us and what does this tell you? One thing that I take from this is that it's really important for you to think about who you hang around with, who your friends are, who you're studying with, because that can be critical to your own mindset. Anne has an awesome story about this that she experienced firsthand in law school. Anne, will you tell the story?
Yes, happy to. And also with the Pygmalion effect research, it's been, like Martha told about the original study, the very first study that was done at a grade school level, and it's now been, that type of research has now been done in business organizations, in the military, in all kinds of different organizations where they're seeing the same effect. So it's like for real. And my own personal experience with this in law school is So when I started law school, maybe like some of you, I was pretty nervous. I was the first kid in my family to go to college, let alone law school. I was really worried about whether I was going to be able to be successful. And within one of the very first days of school, it might have been at the orientation, a third year who probably wasn't doing well himself just decides to tell me that I better not expect to do very well because everyone there at my law school had done really well in undergrad, and so I should just embrace mediocrity. And I was truly devastated. I didn't even know this guy, so heaven knows why I listened to him, but it really was, I was already in the state of mind of lacking confidence in myself. And so I sort of had decided, well, maybe I just need to do what he says so that I don't, be so disappointed when I'm not able to do well. And my first semester was hard for me. It was very different from my undergrad. I didn't know anyone who had gone to law school. I didn't know any lawyers. And right about in the middle of my first year, I had a professor that took a big interest in me and told me that he saw a lot of promise and asked if I would be his teaching assistant, and just did an enormous amount for my confidence. And after that, like, the trajectory was upward. I then ended up doing, really well. But that first semester was a struggle for me, and I do think a big part of it was just my own self-confidence level. So like Martha said, it is really important who's around you, that you want people who are boosting your confidence, boosting your self-efficacy, and hanging in there with you, not trying to tear you down. All righty, moving on to the pop quiz, Martha.
That's right. All right. I know you all love pop quizzes. You're school nerds, just like we are. So, all right. Your Socratic method-loving law professor calls on you in class. You weren't able to respond as well as you would have liked. Your professor then called on a classmate who responded well. So, we're taking a little peek into your own mindset. How would you answer this quiz? What did you think? How did you feel? And what did you do? All right, well, if you tended to relate to option 1 here, that is, oh, how humiliating, I'm so stupid, I don't belong here, or thinking like, I don't like this class anymore, everyone's smarter than me, or just feeling defeated, like I'm not going to be able to be at the top of the class, so why try? Or maybe you thought, option 2, well, I really didn't prepare well for the class and I can fix that, just a bad day, I'll talk to the professor, I just really having trouble with this. Maybe it was one of those days that you just couldn't get all the reading done and I just didn't prepare well, that's why, maybe option 2. So if you tend to relate more to option 1 with how you would respond, that's more of a fixed mindset perspective. But if you tended to agree with option 2, then you may tend toward more of a growth mindset. So we've talked about the evidence that mindsets may be relevant to your law school career, and we've taken a little peek to see what your mindset might be. So now let's get a better understanding for what different mindsets are. So mindsets are your beliefs about your ability and your potential. They create a mental world that shapes your self-perception. And as we have seen, the overwhelming evidence shows that mindset can influence real-life outcomes. So a fixed mindset is thinking that intelligence or ability is a fixed trait that's measurable by an IQ test, and that no matter how hard you work, your intelligence and abilities will always stay the same, that they're fixed genetic attributes that you're born with. So with a fixed mindset, you might explain difficulty in a school subject as I'm not smart enough. One that I found myself doing when I was in undergrad was I can't do math. That was my fixed mindset about myself with math. I don't know if anybody can relate to that one, but yeah. So
that when we all went to law school. We went to law school because we don't like math.
that is true for me, for sure. All right, so a growth mindset, though, is you believe that intelligence or ability is a potential that can be developed. So with a growth mindset, you might explain difficulty more in terms of a lack of effort or maybe using a poor strategy. Mindsets change the meaning of failure. With a growth mindset, setbacks are just information about your current progress and not a reflection on your self-worth, your intelligence, or your ability. You believe that you can develop yourself, that effort matters, makes you more open to accurate information about your current abilities, even if it's unflattering. And why is that, though? Like, with a growth mindset, you have an orientation towards learning, so accurate information about where you are is critical to learning effectively and changing and growing. If you have a fixed mindset, the meaning of failure can be very different for you. Failure is much harder on your self-worth, and it's hard to be resilient and bounce back from setbacks. So remember, with a fixed mindset, you have tied failure to a static belief about yourself. And oftentimes with a fixed mindset, other people's successes are your failures. Like, so for example, you know, Johnny Gray being number 2 in the class means that you're not that diminishes you somehow because you are number 75. It also creates a real urgency to succeed, and that's tied to feelings of superiority that you can get, because when you succeed, sometimes you're like, oh, this is because I am just like failing or doing poorly on a test means I am a failure. Succeeding means I am a success, so you have to almost continue to succeed to emphasize that feeling of self-worth. So always lurking in the background is that if you're somebody when you're successful, what are you when you're unsuccessful? So why is the fixed mindset so damaging? The fear of failing when you believe failure says so much about your self-worth can trigger that cascade that Anne's talked about of negative mental and physiological consequences, anxiety, negative cognitions. You're not able to think as well. It's that negative, I call it the shame spiral, when you start talking poorly to yourself. I'm dumb, I'm this, and it just gets worse and worse. And it results in reduced effort oftentimes because you just decide, well, I'm not good at this. I'm not smart. And it can have serious health concerns, and it can also really impact your ability to be resilient in the face of pressure. So another pop quiz, true or false? Students with the highest ability are the most likely to display a growth mindset. What do you think? False. Instead, many of these students are the most worried about failure and the most likely to question their ability and to wilt when they hit obstacles. So we have talked about a little bit about why it matters, and Anne is going to jump in here and talk about how we can develop a growth mindset.
Yeah, thanks, Martha. So that last slide helped to emphasize that anyone can get stuck in the rut of a fixed mindset. Whether you're performing really well or whether you're struggling a little bit, all of us can be vulnerable to the fixed mindset. But the good news is that we have for you today, which is why we're having this webinar, is that plenty of research shows that there are things that you can do to help cultivate a growth mindset, even if your tendency is toward the fixed mindset. And the steps that we're going to talk about, as I go through them, you might be thinking, this looks pretty simple, but it's misleading, because what we're talking about doing actually requires a lot of discipline and a lot of attention, because what it requires to develop out of a fixed mindset, or at least make it a little bit better, is to, adjust years of thinking patterns of the voices in your head so that you can switch it to more of a growth mindset. But we can change it, and so the first 3 steps that we're going to focus on are really the first main steps in trying to develop a growth mindset. And the first one is focus on learning. So Martha, can you take us to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
So focus on learning. That's the growth mindset. And the growth mindset is also sometimes are referred to a learning mindset versus a performance mindset, an incremental mindset versus an entity mindset. But it's all about the same thing, that when you're in a fixed mindset or in a performance mindset, performing well is so important because you've tied it to your intelligence. So you need to look intelligent at all costs, because otherwise you think you feel unintelligent, and you fear that other people are going to think that you're unintelligent. Whereas the growth mindset, it's not that you don't want to do well. You do want to do well, but you focus more on learning and see new challenges as learning opportunities rather than solely as occasions where your performance is going to be judged, both by you and by everybody else. And it's not that grades are unimportant. You've worked really hard to get to law school, and we all wanted to do well. But the issue is that if you really narrowly focus on grades as opposed to learning, it can have a negative impact on your performance and actually backfire. Whereas focusing more on the growth mindset can really help build the mental resources that you need to bounce back in the case of adversity and to really keep your motivation level up. All right, next slide, Ms. Knudsen, thank you. So the next step is to realize that hard work is key. So what this is about is people with fixed mindsets tend to think that if they're in the middle of studying something and feel like, this is hard, oh my gosh, this is harder than it should be, I must not be intelligent, I must not have the ability to do this, or this wouldn't be so hard. And that again starts having these effects on confidence and resilience, where your motivation level goes down because you think you're not smart enough to overcome this. Whereas people with the growth mindset see the challenge and hard work as part of the key to success. So when they start to struggle, they feel like, a challenge to learn more rather than an opportunity to potentially fail. So it's just a very different way of looking at struggles and challenges. All right, next slide, Martha. Thank you. So in a survey, a study of growth mindset, people were asked about intelligence. And the question was, how much do you think intelligence comes down to effort, and how much do you think it comes down to ability? So, 100% is the whole pie. How would you allocate the percentages to each? Just take a second to think about what would you say? What do you think the percentages would be? How would you fill in these blanks? So what the survey showed, Martha, was that for the people who tended toward the fixed mindset, what they said was only 35% of intelligence was affected by effort. But those with the growth mindset, it was almost double. That they were saying that really, 65% of intelligence is effort. So if you, scored more at the lower end, then that just sort of, keys you in a bit that you might be more in that area. All right, next slide. Thanks. So step 3 is to really directly face setbacks. If you don't do as well as you would have liked to have done, in law school it's typically exams. At least when we were there so long ago, it was, very often just one exam per class. So if you don't do well, to keep yourself in the growth mindset, you don't want to blame the professor. You don't want to give up. You don't want to try to act superior like you didn't really care about it, because we all do. We wouldn't be there. Just embrace it as part of your learning process, your process of getting better. And the mental scripts in your mind should be, things like, I'll work harder next time, I'll work harder in class from now on, I'll spend more time studying on the test, rather than going the negative route of, I'm not intelligent, I can't do this. Oh, and just real quickly on this slide, so the hide mistakes, conceal deficiencies. So this is based on really interesting research that students that tend toward the fixed mindset, they're more likely to cheat. They're more likely to hide mistakes and engage in this interesting, questionable ethical behavior. And it's all about because they believe that they have to perform well to have self-worth. All right, next one. So those were the 3 big steps for developing growth mindset. It was focus on learning, realize that hard work is key, and really directly face setbacks. There's a number of other steps, that research shows also can contribute to a growth mindset, but in the interest of time, we're not going to go through all of them. But I did want to put them up here so that if you're interested in following up more on this, that you'll see that there's other things to do as well. So the first one on this list is to think about yourself as complex and multidimensional, and that's really about that intelligence isn't just one thing. Intelligence isn't just math or an IQ test or a single grade or an ability to do an essay test under pressure. That the idea of intelligence is really much broader than that. Number 2 is highlight your social identities that aren't linked to underperformance. So what this is about is when you get into law school, and even now for me, I'm totally with you, I'm in a PhD program, that your life really tends to narrow. And everything that the full person you were before you got to law school, it might get chipped away so that your interests, your hobbies, your friends, they have taken a back burner so that when everything is focused on doing well in law school and you don't do well, it can really harm your self-worth because you've now hinged everything on that. So the idea here is really to try to keep other interests and hobbies, as much as you can in law school to keep your self-worth up. The next is say self-affirming messages to yourself, and this is all about changing the voices in your head to you'll try harder next time rather than that there's something wrong with your ability or intellect. Reframe feelings of anxiety as unconnected to your ability to do well. So if before you start an exam, like for example, you feel jittery and have a stomach ache, I certainly do, try to train yourself not to think of that as, oh my gosh, this is telling myself that I can't do well, and this is usually unconscious, so it's good to try to make it conscious to yourself when you feel that way. Oh, I have a stomach ache right now. What does that mean? Oh, it means I'm about to face a challenge, and how exciting. This is an opportunity where I'm really going to try to see how much I've learned. Rather than letting feelings of anxiety subtly tell you that you're not ready or you're not prepared or you're not smart. And finally, emphasize the importance of effort and motivation and performance, and de-emphasize inherent talent, intellect, and genius, which was kind of the overarching message through all the steps that we've talked about. So the next slide, nope, back to the ninjas. Back to the ninjas. The ninjas. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, cultivating a mindset, a growth mindset, if you have a fixed mindset or a performance mindset, isn't easy, and it really takes a lot of practice. And I am speaking from experience. Like I empathize with all of you who may have more of the performance mindset, because I do, and I have struggled with it for years, that I fear that if I don't do well on something or I say the wrong thing in class, that everyone's going to think I'm stupid, or that in fact I'm going to be stupid. So these are some messages that I try to retrain myself into thinking that are really about, changing the voices in your head so that they're more reaffirming. So things like, I'm a learner, I keep trying even when it's hard, all these types of things which are the voices that are going to help keep your confidence up. And so that's the mantra is the idea of changing the voices in your head is to try to redirect what the thinking patterns are that you might have already developed. And the reason that I chose, ninjas over anything else that I might have chosen was because, ninjas they're highly trained and disciplined, which is trying to emphasize that, this isn't easy and it takes practice. And I also chose a metaphor because ninjas are active and they attack. They don't just sit back and let things happen to them. They really, are out there taking action. And if you take discipline action, you can grow. And I actually use these mantras myself. In my PhD program, the things that scare me the most are my statistics and methodology exams. And I'm not kidding you. Like, you can ask any of my friends before statistics exams. I am saying out loud to everyone around me, like, I'm a statistics ninja. I am a statistics ninja, to try to get my confidence up and get myself into the right mindset before I take an exam. And so far, I've done okay. So I think it's working. All right, next slide. Thank you. So we've now talked about how narrowly focusing on grades and performance and the connection of that to self-worth can really be exhausting and frankly sometimes self-defeating to what the goal is, which was to try to do well. And how the growth mindset can help enhance your law school experience and potentially even your grades. But now we're going to talk, take a little bit closer look at the scientific evidence about whether law school grades really contribute to a long-term goal of happiness. If our long-term goal is really happiness, how do law school grades play into that? Next slide, thank you. So there's been a lot of research done on what types of aspirations or goals, the goals that we have for ourselves in our lives, are linked to long-term happiness. And what do you think the results are? You might be able to guess. On the left are things more intrinsically oriented, like self-acceptance and relationship orientation and health. And on the right are more externally oriented factors related to success and appearances. So what the research shows is that the stuff on the left, can you forward the slide one ahead, Martha? There we go, the green circle. So that's what the research shows has the strongest link to well-being and happiness compared to the stuff on the right. So if what our goal is in life is to ultimately have a good feeling, enriching life in which we're happy, the stuff on the left is really important and really more important on the right. Not that the stuff on the right doesn't have its place as well, but it's the stuff on the left that really makes a difference to our long-term happiness. So thinking about what our aspirations and values and goals are leads us to the questions of why did you go to law school? So think back for a minute. Most of us, at least a big part of it was that we wanted to help people. I'm going to move ahead, Martha. And the Dave Nee Foundation, actually Kate's group, did a survey of law students to ask them this question about why did you go to law school? And not at all surprising, 87% of the folks answering said that they wanted to help people. They wanted to help people solve problems, that they felt called to serve others. And wealth wasn't non-existent. It was 39%. If you're going to go to school for 3 years and pay a bunch of money and work hard, you want to be you want to make a decent living as well, so that makes sense. But really, I mean, the helping people and the feeling called to serve really is a much bigger factor for most people. So what happens then? Once we get into law school and we go off into the firms, especially thinking of y'all who are still in law school, are you able to remain oriented on that value system of the reason that I came was to help people, or do your values start shifting a bit? So next slide. Thank you. So for a lot of people, and this happened to me, so I speak from experience on this one, but two things can happen. The first is that while we're all learning to think like lawyers, and there's actually research showing this, that we need to learn to distance ourselves from our own value systems so that we can make a compelling argument, the best legal argument that we can for our clients that sometimes is not consistent with our own value system. That's what lawyers do. We've all decided that everyone should have a defense and representation, and so sometimes we take positions that we don't personally believe in. So you start distancing yourself from your value system. Number two in what happens to our values is that our values and identities are really shaped by the social environment that we're in. And in law school, what the direction becomes, and this was certainly true in my law school, is that everyone around you is prioritizing top grades, getting on law review, interviewing with prestigious law firms, that the picture of success becomes this fairly narrow path of doing as great as you can so that you can get a job with the highest salary. And we start seeing, then even if that's not how we saw success, or it's not how we thought we saw success before we started into law school, we can really start having our values reshaped. So those become our values as well, or at least, our interest in what we begin pursuing while we're in school. And in the process, we start disconnecting from who we are in our own core values. So can you just put up all the parts of that, Martha? So the desire to get good grades, is part of this whole thing of wanting to do well and get a job with a prestigious firm. It drives a lot of anxiety. It certainly did for me, of really, really wanting to do well, or what would become of me. So why do we care so much about grades? Like we all certainly want to do at least well enough so that we can get a job. Like, no doubt about that. But outside of that, is it really worth all the anxiety that we put on ourselves? Because the grade itself doesn't get us anywhere. So we must think that getting a good grade somehow gets us to an end goal that's important to us. So what's that goal? If we decided to go to law school, we all decided to go for a lot of different reasons. But I think the main reason, if you really think about it, is didn't you go because you thought ultimately it would lead to a happy life, or a happier life, and that's really what you want in life? It's not just about just making money alone make you happy. Like, isn't it really like at the bottom, that's what we're trying to do, is find something that's going to make us happy? So so the question then becomes, are good grades a strong link in the chain that leads to a happy life? And if it's not, then we might want to rethink about how anxious we should all get about it. And Martha mentioned this study a little bit earlier, and this was a large-scale study done by a couple of researchers on practicing lawyers. There was also some law students in here, asking what were the drivers of well-being for lawyers and what undermined well-being. And they looked at a number of things that lawyers and law firms really pay a lot of attention to and really venerate, things like income, class rank, law school rank, law journal, to see whether they were linked to subjective well-being, whether people were feeling good life satisfaction and generally good positive emotions, a balance of positive emotions over negative emotions, based on these things. So as you can see, I don't know how much you all know about correlations, but generally anything like the ones are quite low. 1s and 2s are considered pretty low. 3s, 4s, and 5s are sort of middle range, and anything above that in the social sciences, at least, it's quite big. So all the stuff that we're all really focused on, like income, it's not nothing. It's definitely positively related to well-being, but not nearly to the amount that would make us want to proportionately spend so much time thinking about it like we do. And then on the other side, so class rank and law journal was correlated with income, and so class rank, that's like how your grades are, how you ranked in your class. It's a 0.2, so again, like, it's not nothing. If you care about income right now, which you probably do, you have loans and all sorts of things, that there is a small correlation between class rank and income. But the good news is 0.2 is quite small. So that means that your class rank, you don't have to have the highest class rank to think that your income is going to be okay. That there's plenty of room still for people not at the top to still make a good living. As you can see, like, class rank has a very low correlation to be happy. So you can still get a job and still be happy. So maybe that will help ratchet the anxiety down a little bit. The study also found things that were strongly tied to well-being. And it's things that like we just don't really think about all that much. So the study was based on a really well-established motivational theory in psychology called self-determination theory. And it's based on the idea that we all have these three basic needs. An environment can contribute to them, or an environment can undermine them. So the idea of autonomy is that I feel like I'm acting volitionally, I'm not being bossed around, I'm not being forced to do things that I don't want to do. Relatedness is like relationships. I feel like I belong, I feel like people care about me and that I care about other people. And competence is competence, you know, effectiveness, mastery. I feel like I'm able to learn and grow and be effective at being a lawyer. And for the social sciences, like when you see things like 0.66, that was like the first time I saw this study, like I think my head twisted around, because you just don't see numbers that big. So for me, like it was such an eye-opener for how to start talking to law firms and in law school, in thinking about what really is going to raise your well-being and what sorts of things should you be looking for in law firms when you start looking for them. You know, you want a decent salary for sure, but that probably shouldn't, you want enough so that you can have a nice living and pay your loans and all that good stuff. But you really should also focus on these other things that really have strong contributors to your well-being. At least that's what I would want to do. All right. So just real quickly recapping, grades should not equal your self-worth, you know, which can be, if you're inclined to make that tie, those are difficult messages to cut off, but that's, you know, one of the main points that we were trying to do today. And that, yeah, so the law school pedagogy and methods are beyond your control. So the Socratic method is what it is, so just try to go into it with a learning and growth mindset. And then, you know, thinking about changing the mantras, the voices in your head, to something that's going to orient you more toward learning than trying to improve your performance. And think about, you know, more intrinsic aspirations, as opposed to focusing so much on I need to make a lot of money, since the evidence at least is, you know, that's not strongly tied to well-being. And if you want to learn more about growth mindset, one of the best books on it, especially for non-researchers, is Carol Dweck's Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. It's a pretty quick read. You can also get it on Audible if you prefer to listen to books. And other options are The Resilience Factor, which does a really good job about sort of talking about the voices in your head, about trying to reframe, re-message the voices in your head so that you bounce back better from adversity. And Learned Optimism is another good one, especially for lawyers and law students, that evidence shows that we tend more toward a pessimistic explanatory style as opposed to an optimistic explanatory style. And that can have effects both on performance and well-being. It's very similar to the growth mindset, so you might want to pick up that as well. And that is all we have for today. So if y'all have any questions, you can type them into the chat box, and we'd be happy to hang around for a bit and answer some questions. And we'll see if anyone has any questions. Martha, is there anything you want to add, anything I missed?
I just wanted to thank Ann and Martha for their time and for volunteering to share their expertise with us. And, you know, one of the things that really stuck out, well, a lot of things stuck out, but one thing when you mentioned, Ann, about the importance of being multidimensional, I think that's so challenging for law students, because they just feel that their whole identity is wrapped up in being a law student. And I can't emphasize enough that for health and wellness, it is important to have, you know, to foster that multidimensionalism.
Yep. Yes. Good point. For sure. For all of us, I think we get wrapped up in our jobs and school and whatever it is. Yep. And hang up our self-worth on something really narrow.
So I believe that you can type your questions into the chat box or the questions box, and we should be able to see them.
I haven't been able to see questions the whole time. So if you guys aren't seeing them, then maybe we can just close for the day.
Sure. And Anne and Martha were very kind there to share their contact information. So I know that they would both be open to hearing from you.
Absolutely. All right, I guess thanks so much for having us then, Kate. It was our pleasure to get to present this evening, and I hope folks on the phone took some good stuff away from it.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.